Hello all my friends in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Kansas. This is the Blue Water Outlook Weekly Water Outlook for April 21st, 2013. Well, across the nation, I wanted to sort of start off with the big picture here. You can see that Midwest was very active and actually some major flooding along the Mississippi and across parts of northern Illinois. But over our region here, you can see there was a stripe of some thunderstorms over the central part of Oklahoma. But most of Texas, only light precipitation, and West Texas and far South Texas, no rainfall at all over the last week. Again, very, very dry. If we look at the close-up here, you can see that band of thunderstorms here produced a little bit heavier rain, 4 inches or more, but very, very, very narrow stripes. So if you're in there, you receive some pretty heavy rain. Some modest rain in here, 1 inch to 1.5 over the northeast part of the state of Texas. Elsewhere, very modest to light rain, and anywhere sort of west and south of this line, very light rain or no rain at all. And you can see the percent of normal precipitation in red here. Most of the region received below normal precipitation, except for that small part of northeast Texas, that very narrow diagonal stripe across Oklahoma, and that was actually fairly heavy for the week. But again, that was a very isolated event over Oklahoma. If we look at soil moisture, for quite a few weeks and months now, you've been hearing me talk about the origins of the precipitation patterns have developed and then moved east. And you can see this now, a very abrupt line with wetter soil moisture to the east and much drier to the west. The central part of Oklahoma is sort of in the middle of that, as well as this narrow band in Texas. And then as we get into the western parts of Kansas, far western panhandle Oklahoma, and a very large part of the western half of Texas, you see those very dry soils and soil moisture negative anomalies in those regions. So as you look at the drought monitor, you can still see that we're very prone to drought over the south, and there have been some improvements over the eastern parts of our region. It's pretty much gone across Oklahoma and Louisiana. It's eroded a bit over eastern parts of Oklahoma and eastern Texas. It's sort of gotten back into sort of the lighter degrees of drought, maybe a D1. But as we get into the western parts, it's still very vulnerable as we're heading out of the winter season into the early spring, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more precipitation because we don't want to go into summer in the hotter months with these persistent areas of D3 and D4 drought. Unfortunately, it looks like that might be the case. Now, if we look at the departure from average greenness, this can be interpreted in a number of ways. I think one way to look at it is that greenness will depend on both temperature and precipitation. And for the most part, I think these areas of yellow and red, which are below normal greenness, really means that it's been very, very dry in these areas. Oklahoma, you can see sort of a mix of green and yellow. That means there was some areas greener than normal, some areas not as green, a little bit more mixed. Stream flow, though, corresponds very directly to precipitation, as you might suspect, and you can see that stream flow is well below normal. Most rivers are much below normal over central and western Texas, and normal over the eastern parts of the state. A very abrupt dividing line here for stream flow. Right there, look at that. You can really see that pattern of precipitation, much drier to the west, or much lower stream flow to the west, and more normal to the east. Now, I mentioned last week that we were going to go into a positive Arctic oscillation. I also mentioned that I'm going to gradually not be talking about this as much because as we get more into spring, we have other driving factors of the weather. But it did reach into a very high positive phase, the highest we've seen for quite some time, and it does look like it's going to be dropping back into a neutral phase. And I think the main impact is that the overall jet stream will be a bit further north. And you can see here for the last 7 days, I mentioned those colder than normal temperatures over most of the nation. That did occur, but as that front or jet stream lifts north, you can see we also have areas of warmer than normal temperatures over the far south and the eastern U.S. So looking at the next couple of weeks, first of all, this week, the jet stream is to our north, and pulses of energy in these areas of those red lines will generally be tracking to the north of most of the south area. It will be brushing across parts of Kansas and then eastward. There will be some precip precipitation over the southern region, but for the most part, the dynamics or the energy with this will be further to the north. Likewise, areas of low pressure, to really enhance your precipitation, you're going to want to be north of these areas of low pressure. And you can see that will be impacting parts of Oklahoma and then further up to the north. But that's going to really leave out of the action south parts of Texas, and while most of the energy, like I said, goes to the north. So here's the rainfall forecast. This is a very similar story that I've been telling for quite some time. Just modest amounts of precipitation over mainly northeast Texas. This looks very, very familiar. I think there'll be actually less than last week, and then it'll really drop off further off to the western parts of the state. A little bit more over Oklahoma, the eastern half of Oklahoma, and then kicking into phase more to the east of our region. So this is a very familiar story. This is going to most likely bring precipitation a bit above normal in this region, a bit above normal in this region, more close to normal for the week in this region, and everywhere else looks like we'll once again experience below normal precipitation. Now this is week 2 from a model that's looking out a little bit further out. I have low confidence in it at this time, but I'll have to keep an eye on it. It does show that perhaps there could be a bit more precipitation in week 2. But like I said, right now, these models, unless I see them continue this trend for several model runs, I'm a bit skeptical of this. But I will mention this in my midweek update that if this is confirmed. But right now, like I said, I'm a little bit more skeptical that this will happen. So the takeaway points from this week's briefing, energy and storm tracks mainly to the north and east. I don't see anything overall that's going to bring a lot of significant precipitation to the southern region. There will be some scattered precipitation over eastern Oklahoma, eastern Kansas, and Arkansas, but western areas, including central and western Texas, light or once again, no rain throughout this week. Hey, I thank you again for listening to this broadcast and this briefing. We'll be updating this in a week.